What's up, Chumbags? Welcome to the HQ. You're listening to the Respawn Station podcast. My name's Nick Sivak, and I'm joined by Sri Kandula.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it that time. Let's go.
That was great. That was beautiful.
It's almost like I watched the last episode before we started. So
we got to research every time. Yeah. Never say we don't prepare for one of these episodes. All right.
Never. We got most likely a lighter episode this week. Not to say that we didn't enjoy our 3-hour discussion about Call of Duty last week, but maybe
we want to give more people time to listen to that one still.
Yeah, exactly.
Work their way through.
But it's a little bit. I don't know if beneficial is the right word, really, because of the topics that we're going to be discussing. But it is a bit of a slower news week outside of the absolute dumpage of layoff news and everything that's kind of dropped on us today. So, but we'll get into that along with sort of some stories about how we got into this whole games media journey that we're on together. So you'll have to stick around for that. But before we get into all of that, we do have an important and fun question that we like to ask each other, and that is what we've been playing this week. I've been playing some stuff. I know you've been playing some stuff, Sri, so why don't you kick it off? What have you been toying with this week?
Interesting phrasing there. So here's the thing. I'd like to think that I'm better than everyone else and, just above the normal mortal toils, but I have to admit that I get jealous a little bit, and I've seen all this Nintendo Switch 2 conversation, and I'm like, man, do I want one? Is this time? And so I decided, here's the thing, right? I did not get a Switch 2. Okay, let me put that out there. But there's two aspects to that make me jealous, right? The first is a Nintendo-esque game, a game that's very charming, easy light, and I'm not saying that it's just a Nintendo game, like Astrobot, I think qualifies in that genre.
Sure.
Even though it's not a Nintendo game, but Nintendo does it really well, and that's what they're known for. And so that's the first aspect. And I'm happy to say that first aspect was lifted off of my shoulders. I don't know if the metaphor tracks, but I don't feel it as much because I've been playing Ruffy and the Riverside on the Steam Deck. And let me just say, if you don't know what Ruffy and the Riverside is, so maybe the 3D platforming community might have heard of it over the last few days or last week and a half or so, because it just came out. It is a 3D platformer, very much so in the vein of kind of the classics that people often refer to. It's a small, vibrant world. You go around. There's coins, like all the things that you'd imagine in this sort of game are present. I am not yet done with it, so I can't give a comprehensive review. But I have over 5-6 hours into it at this point, which I think is over half of the game. Maybe. I think maybe if I'm going mainlining it, it would be half the game. I am taking my time with it though, because I gotta admit, it is a darn charming game. It's not just the fact that I'm playing a 3D platformer; it's the fact that it is so satisfying to play that I'd pick it up and I'm like, oh, let me just see what's going on, and then all of a sudden, I'll just go completely off the track. The world is small, but it's littered with kind of things to solve and puzzles to kind of put together, and it's a lot of fun. At the core of the gameplay mechanics is this swap ability, which essentially lets you copy this a property of one thing and then paste it onto something else. Sure. It sounds a lot more like, whoa, how did they do that type of thing in description. In practice, it's a little bit more subdued. There's only certain things you can kind of interact with, and while you can definitely play around with it, it's not truly, you can't just completely go ape shit in doing it, mainly because also you're playing as a bear, not an ape, so it also helps. Now there's a lot of charm into this game in terms of I don't even I don't know, man. It's first of all, the world is 3D and the character is like a 2D paper, and I guess kind of goes with the copy and pasting aspect of it all. He also has a bird that's kind of like, or sorry, a bee that's kind of always with him. So whenever he jumps, and then if you hold the jump button, the bee, you hold onto the bee, and then you kind of like slowly descend a little bit instead of just plummeting to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there's a lot of puzzles and stuff that you can kind of tackle. They either revolve around the copy and paste thing, or sometimes it's just like visual puzzles you have to kind of solve. But it is a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm looking forward to playing the rest of it. Hopefully next week, I'll get around to that. And I've been just chipping away at it here and there. Oh, and again, dude, there's a lot of charm in this game. One of the things I think is really fun is that if you jump on anything circular like a hay bale, well, not a circle, but like a wheel shaped, so like a bale of hay, or one of the circular ones,
Mm.
or like a boulder, you can just start like riding around like a car, and
Oh,
so
nice.
and then yeah, so there's a few things like that. More to come, but there'll definitely be a kind of a written review on this as well, so that I can kind of express my full thoughts. But definitely a solid game. Ruffy in the Riverside. If you don't want to hear my final thoughts, if you've heard enough and you just want to go dive into it, it is 100% comes with my stamp of approval, because at the very least, I don't know if it'll be like the story's is okay. It's not an incredible story. You're essentially just your town of Riverside is in danger, so you have to, and the town sign is destroyed, and so all the letters are scattered, and you have to go find the letters because they have
Ah.
like they're sacred. So there it is. That's the premise. But I don't know if the story will live up to the kind of the we'll have the payoff that I'm looking for, but at the very least, it's just a fun time.
Mm.
Um, just play around. Now, anyway, that's the first point, right? That's the Nintendo charm aspect was ticked off. But the second thing is some cool new gadget, right? Like this, and then at the end of the day, the Switch 2 is a cool gadget. And for my birthday, I got exactly that. All right. While Nick is playing the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm playing the PlayStation Vita 2. This is it. The Portal. It has a cover on it, but it is the black version of the Portal.
Oh, nice.
And I have not gotten the chance to play around with it too much because, again, I'm playing on roughly in the Riverside. But I have played like a little bit, like 30, 40 minutes of this. There's two things I can give you right off the bat, right? First of all, absolutely ridiculous that this is just an internet console. But I still can't get over that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that since it came out, because when it first came out, it was literally the only thing you could do was use this to turn on your PS5 and then play it remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Now for PlayStation 5 PlayStation Plus, like premium members or whatever, they've added the ability to directly game stream. So instead of turning on your PS5, you just stream directly from the cloud onto this thing and
Ah.
play that way. I find that a lot better. I tried both again, 20 minutes of one, 20 minutes of the other, and I find that the quality of the PS5 streaming kind of dips occasionally, and I guess that varies based on obviously internet uh, power or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but streaming directly to this with the cloud is way better, and I've noticed very few kind of dips in quality or lag and stuff like that, which has been it's awesome. But that being said, still a little bit ridiculous. I wish there was, I wish this was the PlayStation Vita 2. That's a little saddening. But that being said, this might be, Nick, the best handheld I've ever used. Like in terms of form factor.
Uh-huh.
And that's part of that is because it's so thin. This is just a screen. They pretty much just took a DualSense controller and then split it up and put a screen in it. The screen looks nice, but this, I think the DualSense feels great, and it just feels like you're holding the DualSense, but with your hands a little bit further apart.
Mm-hmm.
So undoubtedly, because of the fact that it doesn't have all the bulk of the hardware on it and all that stuff, it is so good to hold in the hands.
I've gotten a little bit of
Big fan of
hands-on
that,
time with the Portal, and the one thing that always trips me up is the PlayStation button being up in the top,
Yes,
part.
yeah,
That's the one thing that I'm
it's a
always
little
just like, oh, where is it on here?
Yeah, and then also like the trackpad is on the screen, but it's like two particular parts of the screen. And
Mm,
so like, left or right, essentially you can either hold it. Okay, it's there we go. So if you're on, it's either like right here, you can tap that, or right here, tap that.
mm,
That's how you use the trackpad. But it's finicky. And also if you want to hit the start button, that's where you have to do it. So
yeah.
that's a little weird, but regardless, I'm looking forward to using that more. I think Nick and I have talked about this, about like doing one, like playing through a game like on game streaming, and then like talk about that experience. And I think we had this idea last year, so 2024 was when we had it,
Mm.
but 2025 or whenever we do it, but maybe this will be the time that I'll finally get around to that. But no, I'm excited to check that out more. Quickly rounding off what I've also been playing, Call of Duty. Other than that, it's been Call of Duty. I've played in the last since we've last spoken. I have played and finished Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2.
Nice.
Most of Black Ops 2 I was able to play in the month that it takes place in, June 2025.
That's
I
extra.
did finish it. Yeah, yeah. I did finish it yesterday, which is of course July 1st. But man, what a good game. And also this time around, I specifically went in to get the canonical ending of the game. Again, because I'm going through all of the games in order, or in what I think is the order. I finished Black Ops 2, and I was like, oh, let me just look at what the like where Black Ops Cold War fits into this whole thing. And there's like theories, and people are like, it actually connects both the Black Ops and the Modern Warfare games somehow. I'm like, okay, I don't. That's too deep into my.
There is
I
a
don't know.
character that appears, I remember, that is from Modern Warfare in the game.
Oh,
So
okay.
I feel like it's a very loose connection, but
Yeah, I feel like people are getting like, I don't know, like Doctor Who level, like fucking fandom of like, oh, how does this connect? The numbers, Mason. What do they mean? Um, I will also shout out. So since the last episode, Nick and I have both been away for a little bit, and I'll share one short because again, I'm a gamer, guys. I'm a gamer, but unfortunately, on my trip that I went to, I didn't take any gaming handheld or anything with me. I was just like I'm there to enjoy the time, and the time turns out to be fucking hot as hell. It's like 97 degrees. I'm just roasting in there. Anyway, this particular day that I was going, there was a layover. So I was like, I had one flight. It was like an hour and a little bit. I had like a 50-minute layover, and then another hour and a little bit flight to my destination. That layover was supposed to be at like, let's say, 4 o'clock, right? It's supposed to be 4 o'clock. It's getting time, and the people come on the loudspeaker, and they're like, "Hey, just to let you guys know, your flight needs maintenance. All right, the crew for the maintenance hasn't arrived, and it's at a different airport. So the crew has to get there, fix it, and then the flight crew gets on, and then they fly to where I am to pick this crowd up. And so they delayed it there, and it was like 6 o'clock, and then they delayed it again at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And
brutal.
I was like, you know what? I can't deal with this. There was another flight that also leaves at 8 o'clock to my destination, and they had like a few seats left. So Alexa and I got those tickets, and we're like, all right, let's just wait till 8, and then we get on the flight. And so I've never done this before, but in that airport they had a gamer lounge. All right, so I went to the gamer lounge. All right, and they had a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X or a PC. I saw people playing, like PC was full of people playing Valorant and stuff, which totally checks out. I got a PS5 and I was kind of messing around with it, and I played a little bit of Tekken 8, which I'd never played a Tekken game before. Kind of goes hard. I mean, I don't know what these games are, but the story is just like crazy over the top. I mean, I played like 30 minutes, and this dude's challenging the world to a championship, or like the countries will pay. Like each country has to send their best fighter. Anyway, that was cool. And then I also played Warzone on this random ass airport, PS5. I played Warzone, a little bit of casual Warzone, just to see how I did. Nick, I ended up getting 39 kills in this game. All right, I was second place only because my teammate, who shall not be named, what like wasn't playing, and I killed everyone except the last person, and then that person couldn't seal the deal. So it was a little unfortunate, but 39 kills. I don't know what it was. It was the fact that I didn't have the pressure of my own username holding me back. But man, I have not torn it up like that before.
I thought it was gonna be like the plane was coming, and it was just like, oh, I gotta go.
Oh,
I gotta seal out this game.
Let me finish, guys. Hold on. Delay the plane. Yeah. No. So there you go. That's I think all of what I have been playing. Nick, how about you? I know you've been playing a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
You've been on a bigger trip than me.
Yes. Oh, I didn't even think about the stuff that I played there. So, yeah, I've been all over the place because of the trip that I went on. I went on a little vacation with family, and before I left, I technically beat Elden Ring Night Rain. To put a bow on that, I was able to beat all of the main bosses. I've attempted the they have the new like Everdark Sovereign or whatever it's called, which are like the remixed versions of the fights. I tried the one from the Gaping Jaw fight, and I was like, I already beat it like a couple times. I don't want to.
I tried the centaur guy. I forget his name, but oh boy, that did not last long.
Yeah, so partial skill, partial being carried by good randoms got me to the credits for Night Rain. And if you want to hear about Night Rain, listen to our last. Credits? Yep. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to hear our thoughts on Night Rain, I think we've spent quite enough time talking about our various praises and issues with it. Yeah. So finished that. What was the other thing I finished? I thought I finished another game.
SpongeBob SquarePants and the Cosmic Shake.
There was that. Let me check my GG real quick. I thought there was one other game that I finished for SpongeBob.
We're in the top user percentile for GG.
Oh, it was Mario Kart. That's what I was thinking of. So yeah, I don't even really need to talk about Mario Kart. SpongeBob, though, like you mentioned, I did finish. That kind of got like broken up between Elden Ring and stuff. I don't know why I started that when I did, but finished SpongeBob. It was good, TM. It's
100%.
It's definitely got some jank, but it also has a lot of heart, and it does have some good jokes here and there, which I did enjoy. There's a lot of like bonus stuff that you can go do, and I didn't really feel particularly compelled to go do that. So I pretty much just kind of finished the story, and then I was like, I'm pretty good at with saying goodbye to this game. But yeah, overall, I mean, it was a fun 3D platformer. The levels, I think, were varied enough to feel like, fun and impactful. They had a nice, visual range. And the music, I think, is interesting because it's like, it's good, but it's also like good background music where you don't really think about it. But like, it's not like bad or anything. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. And as a SpongeBob fan, I mean, obviously, they get a lot of mileage out of some of those older jokes that somebody like me would find funny. So I did appreciate quite a bit of the callbacks for that. Let's twist it around again. So now I'm on vacation, and
the timelines.
The last couple, like anytime that this happens, really, and we've been recording the podcast, I have some sort of arcade that I stumble upon and usually play something, and this was no different. I played 2 arcade games. One I had no idea existed, which was a Luigi's Mansion arcade game developed by Capcom, of all things. It was very weird. It's a like you sit in this booth and you have these vacuum things like Luigi uses in the games, and you're flashing ghosts and trying to suck them up and get coins and stuff. It was very confusing though. Like there was just like stuff happening, and then it was just like, oh, hit your revive button, and then it was like, okay, you're done. And I was like, all right. That was fun for about 5 minutes. The other game that I had a bit more fun with was Time Crisis 4, which Time Crisis is kind of like an arcade staple throughout time. Yeah. Obviously, they have these famous, air pistols that shoot back whenever you're firing that are historically always broken. Lo and behold, this one was also not functioning properly, so I didn't get to feel the Time Crisis,
the full experience,
kickback, right? But I did get to play a bit of the opening mission, and arcade games are crazy, man. Like Luigi's Mansion, it was kind of built off of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, which I played last year, the 3DS game that got a remaster on Switch. Because I recognized the level we were going in as a level from that game, but then Time Crisis 4, it's like PS2 graphics essentially on the screen, but it's the concept is crazy. Like you're part of some police force or something, and there's just bugs that were popping out of people and chasing you down hallways and stuff. I have no concept of
feels
what
like you're
the story
describing
is.
A fever dream to your therapist.
Essentially, I mean, I don't really have another way to describe it, but it was fun for a couple minutes to blast around, and that's all I really have to say.
Sure.
It was fun, and obviously Time Crisis 2 is kind of like that golden age arcade experience. I've not come across one of those, unfortunately, so maybe someday, but it's always been a series that I've been casually interested in. I think it would be a really great candidate for a remaster collection, like those House of the Dead games have been getting over the last couple years. I think Time Crisis would be a cool series to get a modern port for. But outside of that, I have also been playing 2 other things. One I'll talk about briefly is RoboCop Rogue City. I started this the other night, and I've only played the opening mission. But I was in the mood for a first-person shooter after Elden Ring and SpongeBob and Mario Kart. I was like, I haven't shot my virtual guns in a little bit, so I threw in RoboCop, and I feel like, even though I've only played the first mission, I feel like I'm gonna have similar thoughts to RoboCop that I do to SpongeBob. Where it's there's definitely some jank and some budget in here, but also right when you actually get control of RoboCop, it's wow, this is pretty fun. The gun feedback feels really nice. Does
it use the DualSense full on
the adaptive triggers?
Adaptive triggers and stuff, yeah.
Yep, vibration, adaptive triggers, all of that. His famous pistol, it has unlimited ammo, which is really nice. So you can just use that if you want to. All the other guns you can pick up have a limited ammo pool. So it kind of incentivizes switching weapons here and there. But if you really just want the RoboCop fantasy of blasting people with that cool looking pistol, they let you just go wild with that. It's a slower paced shooter, which you might expect going into it. RoboCop is very lumbering, and the sound design is very doom 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 whenever he's walking through the environment. So they did a really good job with that. But there's also not a jump button or anything like that. So it's been kind of interesting after playing so many highly movement based shooters in the last couple years to have something that's kind of more grounded and feels a little bit more vintage in that way.
Yeah. Do you think it gives the power fantasy that is the RoboCop? Do you think you feel
so
it?
Far, yes. The other parts of the combat that I've gotten to play around with are you have a punch move, and if you get in close to an enemy, you can grab them, and you really feel that power fantasy when you grab, because you can throw an enemy and other items that you can pick up, but when you throw an enemy, in most games, you would think, toss an enemy, it goes a foot in front of you or whatever. This is just they will fly across the level. Like I actually made myself laugh because I picked up a guy and just kind of looked up in the air, again assuming that he would just go like a couple feet, but he just like went into the rafters and like ragdolled into it. So like, yeah, you definitely get like the power fantasy there. If you like hold the left trigger to like aim down sights, it gives the like, you know, green reticle thing, like cyber vision that RoboCop has. So they there's a lot of really cool touches in there.
Isn't that pretty much auto aim?
Kind of, but it doesn't work like an auto aim in this game. It does like lock onto the enemy, but it's more so like a, how do you want to say it? Like a
eagle eye,
I guess. Like it's an awareness tool. Like it'll highlight the enemy, but it doesn't like lock your reticle onto them. Like you still have to
like aim. Heat vision. You just kind of know
exactly
where they are. Sure.
And then so I played the first mission, and then I played a little bit of I guess like an intermission mission. Like you go back to the police station and you can explore around there, and there's like some story stuff. But one kind of funny thing is that you can do these like little side activities.
This is actually a respawn station. You can't say that here. You can't say
yeah.
No free plugs here. Go ahead.
You can do these like little side quests, and like one of the guys up at the desk is just like, man, this line is so huge, Robo, can you please help me like open up another station? And so you pull people over to this line, and it's basically people giving you like, you know, complaints or whatever, and you have to decide how to handle it essentially. And there's this one like punk who's like, yeah, I have information on like a wanted criminal. And then you say like, what's the information? And he's like, you see that guy on the wanted poster? He's like, that's me. He's like, I want that reward. And then you can pretty much tell him like, you know, we're not going to do that. Or there's like one other option. I did the we're not going to do that. And RoboCop's response was just no. And then they just take him away. So there's some funny stuff in it already. And yeah, like I said, I'm still early days on it. I think describing it like SpongeBob, it's like I'm going in knowing that there's like some jank. It's not like Call of Duty budget.
They're also both not full price titles, you know. I think both of them were $40 when they launched. So yeah, something to keep in mind.
It's been really fun. I'm like a casual RoboCop fan. I've seen like the first 2 movies and nothing past that. So
I've seen the old one, the original, and the reboot. I think is the only ones. So,
oh yeah, I've not even seen.
I got both ends.
But yeah,
there's another one on the way from Neil Blomkamp. So I think so. You know, now's the time.
I forgot about that. Yeah, right on. So yeah, I had less to say about. And we want to get to the real meat here, which is the main game that I've been playing, which is The Alters. We got a review code for this, and you asked if I wanted to play it, and I was like, you know, I've been hearing some decent things about it. I'll give it a shot. And The Alters is, so far, it's like kind of a hard game to describe. I tried describing it to a friend of mine last night, and at the end of it, I was like, I don't know if I did a great job describing it, but I'm going to try my best here. So I'm a couple hours in, I think like 3 or 4 hours in now. So I've started more or less. And the game itself at the opening describes itself as like a multi-genre type game. And that's a very apt way to put it really succinctly, because there's a lot of different things that you end up doing in this game, and it's playing with a lot of different like gameplay styles and I was gonna say presentations, but that's not the right word for it. I'll just start talking about it and we'll see if it coalesces into a succinct picture here. So essentially I'll give the story kind of, you know, pitch at the start here, and then I'll go into the gameplay. So the game opens up, you are in this pod and you're landing on a planet, and essentially you discover that once you crash land on this planet, like your radio's acting a little funky, none of your crew's responding. Essentially you find out that all of the other crew members have died on the entry into this planet. You're the only survivor. And this isn't a spoiler because it happens literally like 2 minutes into the game. So basically, you're trying to explore this planet. Nobody's responding to you, but there's this base that you're trying to get to. And eventually you round a corner and you see this giant base. It looks like a giant wheel with like lights on it and these little like cells inside, essentially. There's like this incoming radiation storm, so it's kind of pushing you towards this base. You're exploring. The environment is very like weird shapes in the rocks that are like very unearth-like, and there's this water on the planet, and it's constantly raining. There's like oil slick in the water. Like they're doing. It's a very interesting kind of visual look, but it's like a very hostile planet, essentially. Essentially, you get to this base and you try to establish a call to this company that you work for called Ally Corp, and it's the signal's very fuzzy, it's breaking up, you can't really communicate very clearly, but essentially what gets through is that this planet is in a 3-star system, which means that there's 3 stars that revolve around each other, and essentially where the base is positioned currently is going to be vaporized in 10 days by a sun that's going to get too close to the planet. So you're all alone, you have this base, and you have to figure out how to move the base, because, like I said, it's like a wheel, so it's a mobile base, and you have to try to figure out how to move it to a safe position on the planet, so that way a rescue party can come get you, essentially. You, as Jan, you play as a named character named Jan, and he is like a kind of like a it's gonna get a little bit confusing here because I'll just get into it. The big kind of thing is that there's this machine in the base called the womb, and you discover on the base there's these things called memory records for all the crew. And Jan can look at his memory record, and it's essentially a visual interpretation of several moments of his life leading up to this time that he's on the planet and in the station. And essentially what you can do is... See, I'm already messing this up so much. On the planet, why everybody's going there, there's this mineral called rupidium that you're trying to find. And apparently this will unlock, untold... magic, space, sci-fi stuff, right? And
it's like space.
Exactly. You find some rupidium on this planet, you use this rupidium with this machine called the womb, and you're able to create alters, or essentially clones of yourself, but they're not exactly clones in the way that you would be thinking. Essentially, you take the mind record, and each of the segments of this mind record were when Jan made like a specific choice in his life, and essentially you can make a branching point where the alter made a different choice, and it kind of sets Jan on a different path, essentially. So the crux of what happens at the start is that you get the base ready to move, and then a critical failure happens with a mechanical component, and Jan that you're playing as isn't a engineer or like a technical guy. And so essentially in the, memory path or whatever, you can select this moment where he decided to not go to college on the current Jan, but he did decide to go to college on this new Jan and eventually became an engineer for this company. And so
I see.
Essentially, you build this version of yourself that has the technical know-how to be able to fix the issue with the base. But, again, it's not as simple as you would think, because basically, Jan comes into being, it's literally called Jan Technician, is how they're going to be, like, separating these by, like, role and the same, character. And he comes in, and he is immediately angry and confused, obviously, at seeing himself, in this space base. He's aware of things like the company and the technology that's used in the space, but he thinks that he's the real Jan and not you that's done things. So you have to, like, try to smooth out the relationship a little bit before he's, like, cool with going and fixing this issue. And then even when he goes and fixes it, he's like, don't talk to me. Like, I don't want to be bothered. And so... there's already a bunch of different things here, and this is just the prologue, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to try to focus myself again because I'm gonna go like Jan. I'm gonna be branching off into 5 different things. So story wise, it is sci-fi stuff. It is kind of philosophical, questions, but there's also like relationship dynamics and things that you need to kind of like work around to get this crew of yourself fully functioning to get you off this planet. Gameplay wise, there's also a bunch of different things. So when you're exploring the planet, it's in third person and you can explore the immediate environment around the base. There's materials out there that you can collect. So there's like metals, there's organics, and in order to collect more of these materials, you need to create like mining structures and link them up to the base, so that way you're able to siphon these resources. Now you might be wondering, why do you need resources? Well, you can expand the base and build new modules to the base. So this I would kind of describe as feeling, it's not exactly like it, but visually it feels a little bit like Fallout Shelter. Like all the rooms are like rectangle grids. Right. You kind of place where they have to go. You have to build elevators if you want to use different levels. But unlike Fallout Shelter, where you're getting like, vault dwellers to house these rooms, you're going to be creating them from your own character. Mm-hmm. And this is already like a little bit overwhelming for me as somebody that's not like super used to management games, but also they streamline a lot of elements of it. So it's not like too bad. It's just kind of like a lot of options that you have at the front, but like it's kind of restricted because it's like, okay, I only have a technician. This room requires a scientist. So like I can't build this yet because I don't have a scientist, Jan, or something like that. And like the resource gathering, it's not like a Minecraft or like a survival game. It's really just kind of like, this is where the metal is, collect the metal, you use the metal to make pretty much everything. So it's got...
And also, I think to kind of specify, this is from 11-Bit Studios, who are most previously, like, they've published a lot recently, but they're known for developing the, I believe, This War of Mine and Frostpunk 1 and 2, I think, is also
gotcha.
them. And so I think Frostpunk specifically is a very like resource management heavy, like survival game. You're keeping this train going in the frozen apocalypse. So it makes sense that it would be intimidating, but I'm glad that they're at least a little bit more kind of reserved than their regular games.
Yeah, I wouldn't even really say it's intimidating. I know I kind of use that word, but it's just like a tiny hair like overwhelming of like too many choices. But at the same time, like I said, like it's really not that bad, especially early on. And then so you have your base building kind of stuff, you have your third person exploration, sci-fi kind of survival-esque kind of mechanics. But then there's also the social system of like talking to your crew members and like sometimes like basically I went up to technician Jan and I was like, hey, you look like really tired. And he's like, well, yeah, it's because I've been sleeping on the floor like all these nights. And then he's like, oh, that's fair. I should try to build you like a dorm. So then you can go on like a little side quest and build like the dormitory space, and then that will increase Jan technician's mood and like will encourage him to work better throughout like a shift, because you can also assign your different Jans to different things. So it's like while you're out exploring, he can be operating the mining machine and getting resources for you. So basically those are the 3 main pillars that I've experienced so far, is like exploration, resource gathering, base building / modifications, and then this relationship system, all while there's like a background narrative of like Jan and how he's grappling with like how he's going to get off this planet, while also grappling with things from his past that have changed for different Jans that like didn't shake out the way that he experienced them. So it's tying like narrative and gameplay and all these different genres into something that feels like pretty unique. I've not really played a game quite like this. but as I'm sure that this conversation has proven, it's kind of a hard game to talk about because there's so many different facets, and I'm only a couple hours in. So, um, yeah, I don't know if you have any
Yeah,
questions or
it's sort of
anything.
the game that I feel like the word of mouth has to really carry, because it does seem like it's a lot of different things. And you know, I was in a similar boat of like, I've heard a lot about it, and so I was like, I wonder what it actually is.
Hmm.
And I think you kind of said it here in terms of like the Fallout shelter of it all, because I looked at I look at the Steam page, and it's got a screenshot that almost looks like it's just like Fallout Shelter, but with like the graphics on maximum.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it feels like it's a lot, but I'm curious because again, you've just started how that'll expand, because at what point does it shift from like the system, because you're still in the kind of early stage, right? You're learning what the mechanics are and
Hmm.
figuring out what happens and how to do certain things. I'm curious, at what point do they just say, all right, the mechanics are now all explained, let's get to just the experiencing this world. And it's also interesting that they've added a literal time crunch to the game in terms of finishing it. So how long
Yeah.
are you into that process?
So it's good that you bring that up. That 10-day period was mainly for like the prologue. That's like your time to get moved to a safe location. Once you do that, I'm in Act 1 right now. Currently, I don't have a time crunch. Basically, every time you go
Oh,
to
okay.
sleep in a day, it starts with the next day, and like during the prologue, it would be like 8 days till the sun arrives, essentially, and that's like your ticking down clock. Currently,
Yeah.
I wake up, it gives me like day 15, and it's like sun is still far away. So I think there's going to be like some grace
Oh, I
periods,
see.
and then the sun will come back
Sure.
into a range where it's like, okay, like you need to start picking up the pace and get on the move again. Currently, we're kind of trapped in the spot that we're at because we're surrounded by a giant lava river that the ship can't get around. So it's like trying to explore
Gotcha.
like how we're going to surmount this obstacle. And I'm sure once I get closer to doing that, it's going to be like, okay, the sun's coming. Like,
Sun is approaching.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's as a sci-fi game, specifically talking about like the philosophical stuff about cloning yourself and memories, along with this like trippy kind of environment and everything. Like it's definitely scratching like a space kind of survival itch. Like it kind of gives me a little bit of the Martian vibes. It's not exactly like straight comedic, but it does have some funny moments and stuff. I haven't unlocked this yet, but I know you can play beer pong with your clones and stuff. So like they have like some lighthearted stuff sprinkled in there, but it definitely feels like it's like a introspective like sci-fi kind of game, and I really dig the vibe that it has right now. And to be fair, because I haven't specifically said it, I am having fun with the game. It's just like you described, like I'm trying to get come to grips with all the systems and everything like that. But it's definitely an interesting game, and it's pretty fun so far. So I'm definitely digging what they're putting out there.
Well, speaking of science fiction, I will also say that, here on the podcast and on the website, we've had to hold ourselves to quite a few embargoes, over the years. A lot of video game embargoes, actually all video game embargoes. But ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, we are doing a book embargo. I have been given a little sneak peek, not a sneak peek. It's the full thing. I've gotten an early copy of a book, a science fiction novel by an acclaimed video game writer, and you're gonna find out about it not next episode, but the episode after that. I believe it's mid-July is when the embargo on that lifts. I'm probably like a fifth of the way done the book, so that's good. I can give me plenty of time to make some good progress. And there's going to be a lot kind of there's another exciting announcement off of that as well. But Nick knows that. That's why he's just nodding slowly. He knows. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. But we got to keep things interesting. Got to make sure you guys are on the hook. But with that said, I think that's all of the games that we have kind of on the docket to necessarily fully talk about.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that you've
Nah, not really. Alters and RoboCop have been the main things that I've been playing. So
Sure. So, with that said, let's get to the news. It's kind of been a slow week, as Nick was saying at the top. I mean, it's pretty much like the start of June soaked up all the news, and so now you only get a little bit of trickle here and there.
hmm.
But sometimes, um, you know, the trickles are awful, and
Yeah.
that's the case for today. So, Nick, I'll let you tackle the first one before we get to the second one and see how much we can even say about this thing.
Yeah, we'll give you like a little sweetener before we get into the bad stuff. But earlier this year, as you know, listeners may remember, I was playing Red Dead Online for the first time on Red Dead Redemption 2. And seemingly out of the blue, they put out this new content update called Strange Tales from the West. And this is unique and interesting because Red Dead Online I don't think has gotten like significant content in like over a year, maybe two. Like it's just mainly been like, oh, we have new outfits in the shop and like there's a new event that's giving triple XP or whatever. But this is seemingly new content coming to the game. And on top of that, it seems from the trailer heavily inspired by the fan favorite expansion to the first game, Undead Nightmare, because there's these like weird like zombie looking creatures. There's like old looking robots that players are like fending off against and stuff. It looks to be like a really kind of wacky, little content expansion. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but I believe I am going to be hopping in tonight to give that a try. So, yeah, just out of the blue, new Red Dead Online stuff. And perhaps this is because player counts were going up. I'm really not sure. This really does just kind of seem like it's out of nowhere, but Red Dead Online was getting pretty popular there for a minute after all these years. So maybe they're like, hey, let's actually invest a little
Finally.
bit extra into this. And because like I would watch videos when I was prepping to play Red Dead Online, and everybody's like, yeah, it's essentially like dead game. Like there's people that play it and everything, but like they don't support it much anymore. It's just GTA 5 updates that gets all the love. So very cool that Red Dead Online is getting a little bit of some new life injected into it.
Speaking of the opposite of that,
Yeah.
so a few hours ago, as of today, Microsoft has announced that they are having layoffs across the business to roughly 4 to 5% of their workforce, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're thinking that it's Microsoft, that's nearly 10,000 people that are losing their jobs. And of course, Xbox is a part of that business, and so quite a few Xbox studios have been hit by layoffs. And so we're going to quickly go through what we know so far. Again, this just happened a few hours ago, so
Still developing.
it's yes, it's very much so. And since we've actually started recording this episode, excuse me, there's been a few updates. Excuse me, gosh, just getting choked up over this. That sounds like a joke, but it also does suck. I was made light of that situation.
Mhm.
So here we go. There's the key takeaways here, right? This is according to Bloomberg, is where I'll report this. Is Microsoft Gaming Division laid off hundreds of employees as part of their broader cost-cutting effort, with widespread and significant cuts across subsidiaries. The layoffs have affected various units, including King Division, ZeniMax, Raven Software, Sledgehammer Games, Halo Studios, Turn 10 Studios, and some other projects have been canceled. Again, we'll get to that. And so, look, here's the thing. Phil Spencer put out this note, and Jeff Keighley also kind of quoted it earlier today. And it says, quote, from Phil Spencer, quote, "To position gaming for enduring success and allow us to focus on strategic growth areas, we will end/decrease work in certain areas of the business and follow Microsoft's lead in removing layers of management to increase agility and effectiveness." Unquote. What a fucking corporate, what a corpo ass slang. What the fuck is that, dude?
Not
So
entirely surprising at this point. I mean, everybody's using the
yeah,
agile line these days.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, okay. First of all, Call of Duty, at the very least, Sledgehammer and Ravens got hit. Both of them are currently like massive support studios for Call of Duty. They're not making mainline games kind of solo, but they do like like entirely like multiplayer or zombies. Like they'll kind of full on take that on. This also meant that the Everwild from Rare was canceled, as well as the Perfect Dark game, which was kind of started at Microsoft as like this, quote unquote quadruple A experience, and they showed off what was it 2 years ago, like a trailer,
I think it was last
and
year's show. Um,
yeah, honestly, it
yeah.
could have been last year, and I guess we could have, if we were cynical and maybe reading the tea leaves, we probably could have realized that if the trailer came out last year and it looked really good, like almost done, it really, top quality there, from the glimpse that they showed.
Hmm.
Um, that if they didn't even have a glimpse, like a teaser of any kind, in the Xbox Games Showcase this year, I suppose, you could have seen it coming.
Yeah, I think what was also surprising is that the initiative that was the main studio behind that. I mean, obviously, this game has had a bit of a tumultuous time. Like, there's been
Yeah.
reports over the years of like troubled development, but that studio is also closed now as a result of today's layoffs. They just fully gutted that studio, which is also
Yeah.
becoming a pretty disturbing trend with Xbox specifically. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
even like 3 or 4 months ago that we were having this exact same conversation about, Arcane Austin and stuff like that. It's just like today reading all this stuff, I was reminded of how people talked about EA like a decade ago, where they would pick up studios like
Sure.
Pandemic or something like that, and then just close the studio and lay everybody off. And it at what point does that kind of shift to Microsoft's side? Because it's just like, you look at their track record this year, and it's just like it's anything worthwhile that's been a headline for them has just been like layoffs and studio closures, and it's just like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah, and Turn 10, who are also Microsoft, studio, obviously. They are known for their Forza Motorsport games. Half of that studio is gone. 50% is
crazy.
gone here. Another big thing is that ZeniMax Online, who have most notably been working on the Elder Scrolls Online game, have also been working on an MMORPG set in the Elder Scrolls universe. I believe it's set in the Elder Scrolls
I
universe.
don't think that was
Um,
known. I think it
oh,
was
okay, okay,
like
okay.
it was, yeah,
It's
it was just a
it's
new
just an
MMO.
MMORPG.
Hmm.
That game has been canceled. There's layoffs at ZeniMax. Uh, or just a few minutes ago, the ZeniMax Online president Matt Firor, Firor, put out a statement that says, "quote After more than 18 years leading ZeniMax Online Studios, I'll be stepping away later this month. The studio and the Elder Scrolls Online will be in great hands under the direction of new studio head Joe Burba, along with executive producer Susan Kath and game director Rich Lambert. Together, this leadership team has spearheaded many of ESO's biggest ideas and expansions and will continue to make this game something we're proud of. We're all proud of. While I won't be working on the game anymore, I will be cheering you on and adding on the thousands of hours I've already spent in game. There are many more stories to be told, adventures to be had, and I know this amazing community will carry on that shared legacy and success forwards. Thank you from Matt.
That's
Unquote.
also particularly brutal for that one because that game reportedly has been in development since 2018. So that has to have been far along. That's 7 years of these people's lives that just got ripped away from them. Like, ugh.
Yep. And it is, uh, it sucks that in the last 2 years, like, I mean, as you were saying, like, it's like 20,000 jobs have been gone from Microsoft alone. Like, roughly. I'm going to use rough numbers because I haven't added it all up. But like it's very unfortunate, and luckily, there's an ebb and flow to this industry for sure. And we had uh, the Hi-Fi Rush team that I'm
Tango.
forgetting the name of.
Tango
Tango
Gameworks.
GameWorks, yes. They were kind of brought back to life, and the studio is now working on presumably another Hi-Fi Rush game, which is very exciting. But that doesn't happen very often, and especially when you're looking at this, like not all the studios were canceled, but like or were shut down, but like a lot of them were impacted just across the board. Uh, yeah, which is very unfortunate, and I don't know, man. King, obviously, if you don't know, is the Candy Crush team over there, and uh, it's so weird. And even that messenger that I just read also kind of has this, but like there's this level of when these mass layoffs happen that people just use the most like robotic. And I'm not saying AI wrote this or anything like that. I'm just saying it's the most dissident robotic voices or tones to convey sadness, question mark. Like, I mean, is it supposed to, like, are you trying to like it's this terrible thing, but people are either trying to like they're clearly trying to like spin it around to be like it's actually the future and the future is gonna be bright.
Hmm.
But yeah, like no amount of real kind of yeah, like I said, corpo speak can downplay how many people have lost their jobs or were impacted by this,
And
and
it's also
a
like,
lot of games.
finish what
Yeah,
you were
go ahead.
saying.
No, I mean it's a lot of games. I mean,
Yeah.
that are either gone forever that we'll never kind of see come to light.
Yeah, and like you also, these statements, like especially from Microsoft, keep going back to like we're going to be strengthening like our core kind of properties and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, so like if these big games start shit in the bed, it's like, okay, so what was, you're going to scrap all your kind of like you know up and coming talent and everything, or these industry veterans, like we mentioned the ZeniMax CEO, but also the one of the lead guys from Rare I saw also left after like 30 years at Rare. And it's just like, okay, like it does not inspire confidence as a consumer, unrelated to the massive impact of the upheaval of thousands of people's lives. But as a consumer looking at this, it does not inspire any confidence when this keeps happening, even multiple times at the scale it's happening in the same year at the same company. Like it's really unfortunate and really shitty. Like I don't know.
Yeah. Also, High Moon Studios is also affected by today's layoffs. They're also a Call of Duty team who mainly work on the like on Warzone and stuff like that. But yeah, it's it also feels like very much so planned, and I'm not saying retroactively it makes me feel any different, but it does have like the idea that this the Xbox Game Showcase happened, and I think they did a similar thing last year. I could be wrong, but like it was like the Xbox Game Showcase happened, and they're like people were riding high off of that, and then they like dropped the shitty news,
Mm. I think it was
and
like price
kind of
increases
really
or something last year or something to that effect.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems it's a sort of a cycle. Now, if Xbox ever pops off, okay, something's happening soon. Just keep in 1 month out, see what's gonna happen. But yeah, dude, it sucks. We'll see how this kind of. Currently, I don't think Xbox is going to be affected right away, mainly because kind of the Xbox Game Showcase and the games that they were announced there or showcased there will likely be coming out. Like those are the ones that they were able to assess and say these are the safe bets that we can make. Also considering, I think that they said that, man, this really puts it in perspective, right? And I know this is true in the corporate world of like layoffs happen. Layoffs don't happen immediately, right? Like it's a long process. And I think maybe this gives an idea of how long this might have been. But like in one of the kind of shows that they were in the post shows, I believe Phil Spencer said that they were started working on this the Xbox Game Showcase pretty much in like January, at the start of the year.
Hmm.
And so I think that gives you an idea of how far along that they were at least probably, thinking about, yeah, there's certain teams that are not going to be able to finish what they're working on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really, obviously our condolences go out to all the people that are impacted by this. It sucks for everybody when, obviously it sucks for the most for the people that are like woke up and being like, oh, wait, what's this email? That's the shittiest of the feelings. But
And perhaps
even the
naively,
consumers,
I at least for me personally, I kind of thought we were finally over the hump, and it's just like, okay, like, it's not every week now that we're getting layoff stories. It's like every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. But then something like this happens and just rips an entirely brand new band-aid off, and it's just like, oh my god, we're still doing this. Like, come on.
I mean, Microsoft came in and pretty much made up for all the weeks that were missed with this one. But yeah, that has been the bad news of the week. I feel like that should be a segment, welcome to the bad news of the week.
Well, the
There it
one
is.
thing that I will say, again, not trying to make light of any of this, obviously, but the one thing that kept playing in my head was Yahtzee Croshaw. He used to have a semi-recurring segment on Zero Punctuation when he was at Escapist, and it would always start with it was a video talking about like a historical moment in the industry or whatnot. And it would always start with a jingle that said, "Let's all laugh at an industry that never learns anything, tee hee hee." And that's just kind of what's been playing in my head all day. It's just like, yeah, like some of these companies, they really just don't ever learn. Like, it's exactly what you said. It's a cycle that we're in now.
Right. To kind of maybe undampen the mood a little bit, we have a few uh, inbox stories. All right, we haven't done this one in a while, so we'll
Nice.
slip some good news in there. First of all, there is a movie called Turbo Kid. Now, if you're wondering why I'm talking about the 2015 movie set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland in 1997, a comic book fan adapts the persona of his favorite hero to save his enthusiastic friend and to fight a tyrannical overlord. Well, it seems that cult classic movie is now getting turned into a video game. Turbo Kid was announced and it's coming out for the August 5th for the Nintendo Switch. Set in a futuristic, nightmarish vision of the 80s, Turbo Kid is set in a world where humanity has broken down, water is scarce, tyrannical warlords roam the wasteland, and bikes are the seeds of choice for would-be survivors. This is from Outer Minds, who most notably, I think, made the PewDiePie's Legend of the Brofist and Tuber Simulator video games. Um, Honestly, though, this does look cool. It's a single-player Metroidvania with where essentially you can also ride a BMX bike. So yeah, that kind of changes things up a little bit. Um, and also the art style looks cool. That's mainly the reason why we threw that in there. Next, we have. Oh, you know what? I'll throw this in there because I thought it was quite a surprise. It's maybe not the good news of the week, but it's definitely not a negative. It's definitely not bad news. All right, we've finished with that segment. So Nick was talking about the altars earlier, and there was a statement that we got received earlier this week about the altars from 11-Bit Studios. Um, so essentially, there's been some talk, and Nick, I don't know if you've seen it, but about AI use in the altars.
I think I've seen a
And
little bit.
so they've put out a statement, and I'm going to give you the full statement because I think it explains everything better than me trying to like half-ass it. So, quote, we've seen a wide range of accusations regarding the use of AI generated content in the altars, and we feel it's important to clarify our approach and give you more context. AI related assets were used strictly as temporary work in progresses during the development process and in a very limited manner. Our team has always prioritized meaningful handcrafted storytelling as one of the foundations of our game. During production, an AI generated text for a graphic asset, which was meant as a piece of background texture, was used by one of our graphical designers as a placeholder. This was never intended to be a part of the final release. Unfortunately, due to an internal oversight, this single placeholder text was mistakenly left in the game. We have since conducted a thorough review and confirmed that this was an isolated case, and the asset in question is being updated. For transparency, we've included a screenshot to show you how and where it appears in the game. And let me just tell you, it's like a screenshot of the game, and it's a monitor in the background has this text that honestly I would not have zoomed in on. But back to this. In addition to that, a few licensed movies that the Ultras can watch in the social area of the base were added at the final stage of development. While those were externally produced, our team was not involved in the creative process, and these required additional last-minute translations. Due to extreme time constraints, we chose not to involve our translation partners and had these videos localized using AI to have them ready on launch. It was always our intention to involve our trusted translation agencies after release as part of our localization hotfix to ensure these texts would be handled with the same care and quality of the rest of the game. That process is now underway, and updated translations are being implemented. To give you a better understanding of what a small part of the overall scope of this game's narrative layer they are, these are external movies. Those external movies are approximately 10,000 words out of 3.4 million across all languages in the game, or just about 0.3% of the overall text. The alternative was to release those specific dialogues in English only, which we believe was a worse experience for non-English speakers. In hindsight, we acknowledge that was the wrong call, but even more so, no matter what we decided, we should simply have let you know. And their final statement, their kind of final round off is, as AI tools evolve, they present new challenges and opportunities in game development. We're actively adapting our internal processes to meet this reality. But above all, we remain committed to transparency in how we make our games. We appreciate your understanding and continued support as we work towards that goal.
Yeah,
there you go. Very straightforward.
Straightforward. The monitor example, we had an entire main topic of an episode talking about AI where we got into this exact kind of thing about using AI for placeholder kind of functionality and stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of understand that. I'm glad that they mentioned with the translation that was the wrong call, because I do think that was kind of a situation where it's like, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, you should have probably delayed. And I get that that's not necessarily a reality for studios at this scale and stuff like that, where they can't really do that. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, that doesn't really feel like a good justifiable excuse that you didn't want to involve your translation partners. It's like, yeah, you should still be doing that. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of my stamp on that. But yeah, I think
no, I agree. But the fact that they, again, the transparency I think was very important, instead of just being like, oh, sweep it under the rug and
precisely, yeah,
get it over with.
So I mean, at least it's good that they're replacing it. That's what they should be doing. So last
one that I'm gonna mention here. All right, and this is a wild card. I got to do at least one of these. Set in an alternate timeline of the early 1990s, Flock Off drops players into Scottish Highlands where a sheep cloning experiment has gone horribly awry. Four unlikely allies find themselves trapped in a remote village, armed with nothing but their bare hands and the surrounding environment in their fight for survival. The first-person action-adventure will have you brawling against woolen undead horde. There it is. It is co-op 1 to 4 players with equipable abilities. Everything's a weapon, so you can just grab shit from the environment and start using it. And there's 3 modes. There's co-op campaign mode and more to come. But man, this just looked like a good old fun time with some friends. So I had to throw it in there. But there you go. That has been the inbox, a truncated inbox. Like a trunk box. Now, ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your seats, because as we transition into the main topic of this show, we're actually going to just roll right into it by shouting out 2 things really fast. First of all, this episode is brought to you by RespawnStation.com. And obviously, that's no duh. Obviously, we're sponsored by RespawnStation.com. But right now, just, as of when we're recording this, we got a hot article that just came out as an interview with the developers of Star Sand Island. It's an upcoming farming life sim, but it's using this NPC affection system, which essentially instead of having the game just be a series of checklists in the way that you interact with other NPCs or with NPCs, not other NPCs. You are a PC, so you're everyone else's. Oh my God, is that why in Pokemon it's a PC? Is it player?
That's a personal computer, I think.
No, but like what? Because you always go for another. Like it's never your own. You know, you hit the second one. Anyway, I digress. I have to talk about Game Freak about this. Maybe we'll interview them. But we've interviewed Star Sand Island developers, Seed Labs, and you can go check out that interview. It's pretty interesting because they explain a little bit more about how the system works and why it's different, and how instead of just a checklist of things for the NPCs to be like, oh, you've now talked to me 10 times in a row, I will marry you now. You know, instead of that, it's a little bit more dynamic of reacting to what you're doing and when you're doing it, and kind of understanding your habits as a player, which I think will go a long way if it's done right. So that'll come out later this year, but for now, you can check out that interview. And then also, there's a little side project that Nick and I have been working on, and it's nothing crazy, but it's something that we've talked about like maybe 2-3 months ago, and we were like, all right, we'll do it soon, and soon is now. So look, I will say that for a very long time, I've always loved start screens. I know that's very simple, but my hard drive on every system, my PS5, my Xbox, my Steam Deck, they all are filled with screenshots of pretty much the start screen of every game I play. I don't know why; it's just been a thing I do. And so I thought it would be cool to have essentially just a page. And I didn't know what platform we were going to use. We've decided on Instagram. But it's just an Instagram page that is all start screens. And so that's exactly what we've done. You can go to Start Screen Gallery on Instagram. That's it. There's no spaces or anything. Just Start Screen Gallery, and it'll be for now. It's daily, but you know, whenever we run out, and you know, well, it'll eventually hit a part where we run out of titles, and we'll have to slowly catch up on them. But it's a collection of start screens. And I also like, now that Instagram has like music, I'll try to pair it with either the game soundtrack if it's available, or just kind of in the vibe of the game in some way. So check it out. It's an interesting one. It's a small little side project that we like to do, and it's not like you're not supporting us, but it's cool to check out.
Yeah, I too am a big start screen enjoyer, and yeah, it's something simple and fun that we can just kind of throw up there and have people hopefully in the future just like take a look and be like, oh yeah, that love that screen. Like there's so many that like it runs the gamut is essentially what I'm gonna say. Is like there's basic ones that are just text. There's some that are a little bit artsy fartsy. There's some that try to incorporate it into the gameplay. So there's a more of a variety than you would think out of something as simple as a menu screen.
And they're also quite important because start screens is the first impressions a game makes on you is the start screen, and it's the combo of atmosphere and music and graphics all kind of combined to give you that initial first impact. And so they're very important. There's a lot of thought that goes into start screens for the most part, and so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they look. And you know what? We're like a handful of posts in, and it's already it's looking nice. It's not about aesthetic of the Instagram account. It's about just looking at the actual
the content,
the games on display. Yeah. But with that said, look, Nick and I are nerds for start screens. That's the level that we are at to bring us to the point where we are now. Because we consider ourselves, to some degree, games media folks. We have, over the last 4 years, somewhat made a name for ourselves, for better or for worse. And so we thought it'd be interesting. In the past, we've had a few developers on the podcast, and we plan to have more, obviously, but we also will have like PR agents. And so we thought this would be the perfect way to give you guys a full package, right? Like you can fully get, no matter what part of the business you want, a taste of it here on the podcast. So Uh, Nick, I mean, this is a story about us, so it's going to be a little bit different, and we're going to get obviously a little bit more loose with how we got to where we are, and it's a different perspective for you guys, hopefully as well, because we're not going to be just talking about Call of Duty games for 2 hours. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but here we are. Now, I guess the place to start this conversation would be where we kind of where this thing started, right? I think at the time when Nick and I first met, and we're not going to go that far back. I'm not going to. That's not what. Let's when I was born. Let's talk about it there.
I remember when
no,
the controller first landed in my hands.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose, yeah, 100% to both of us. And again, that's not necessarily, I guess, what this is entirely about. But for both of us, video games are a huge part of our lives, and we've talked about it in one of the previous episodes about why video games are so important, and how we realized at a young age, yeah, video games can be, well, obviously awesome, but really meaningful as well,
Yeah.
depending on what stage of your life you're in and everything like that. Um,
Good art.
so when Nick, yes, so when Nick and I first met, we were actually working on a TV station, I'll say, a TV network, and it was entirely based on movies or movies and TV shows. And at the time, I had this idea. I was like, guys, hear me out. What if we do this, but for video games? And so there was a version of this that was started back in like 2018, and it was called something else, and it was a small team. It was about 4 people, and we were all in college, and so it was totally different. And back in college we had a what was called an oh my God, it was called an OBS. All right, it's a one button studio. But essentially you go in, there's a green screen or a background, you hit one button and it just starts recording, and then when you press it again it stops recording and it's saved to your your flash drive.
Mhm.
And that's how we started that old channel of, let's do gamer news, talking about the weekly highlights, essentially like the inbox, but we didn't have an inbox back then. We were just reading headlines.
Mm.
Um, that did not go far for numerous reasons, not the least of which being that, we graduated high school, or not high school, we graduated college, and we're just like, all right, well, time to find a job, I guess,
Mhm.
Then the pandemic happened, and that kind of gave us the time to, I think, dive into this. So when it comes to games media, I suppose there's 2 different ways you can tackle it. The first is, well, first of all, it's important that you have, man, this is going to be all over the place, but I'm going to try my best to do it. All right. So 2 ways you can enter. You can either go in and start a website like what we did, or you can go straight to YouTube and post, videos to there, which is like this, what we're doing now.
Mhm.
We kind of had a different process to get here, but because I had some experience with web design, I made a website during the pandemic to talk about video games. It's sort of like a blog, but we weren't just writing about our feelings. That's not what I meant. No, that is what I meant. We were, it was mainly like we tried to like approach it from this very like straight, like it wasn't. Here's the thing, we weren't competing with IGN, right? Like that was we
Scrappy.
established that right off the bat. Yes, exactly. We weren't trying to compete with the big dogs. We were saying we would only cover games that we actually wanted to play or that we cared about, and that was a big thing. And at the time, it was also just me mainly working on that thing. Alexa helped out a little bit, and then I asked Nick. And Nick, I'm curious about what your point of view is when so I've explained my point of view to come into this point of the story. How was your adventure? Because you've also had your own tales, false starts, maybe I'll say.
Yeah. So obviously, as you mentioned, again, we don't want to go all the way back into the annals of time, or whatever. But I mentioned last week when we were talking about Call of Duty that it was around like Modern Warfare 3 when I discovered that like I was really into games a lot and started watching press conferences and things like that. And it was around that time on YouTube where I was also, having that kind of exposure with other groups. Inside Gaming from Machinima was like a big mainstay for me, and that was around the time when I started, going to gaming news websites like machinima.com or Polygon, stuff like that. And that's kind of ebbed and flowed into, YouTube and all that over the years. And so, yeah, similarly in college, I started my own kind of channel to just make YouTube videos and content and things like that. There was a version of a podcast that I did with my good friend Shane, and like part of it was that I wanted to kind of throw my hat into the ring with all of that. Part of it was that I just kind of made it as an excuse to hang out with my friends. So that was because for my friend group, not all of us went to college, so it was kind of like a thing where it's like, this is like a way that we can still kind of, stay in touch and, connect with each other and all that. But yeah, as I'm sure you understand fully well, you take on a lot of work when you are starting something like that. And like for me personally, it's like I didn't want to kind of like divvy out work to like my friends that maybe weren't as in on it as I was. So it was just like, yeah, if you just want to show up and talk on the podcast, like I'll take care of the rest of that. So we did that for a while, and then after a certain point around the time of the pandemic, like I tried to kind of rekindle that again, but like at that point I was just kind of like, I don't know if this is necessarily like I'm an editor. And so I remember very specifically going through and I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing playthroughs of games. Like, I think that'd be fun. Try to edit it down. And I was watching my first playthrough back in the edit, and I'm like, wow, this really isn't that entertaining, if I'm being honest. Like, even when I'm like, I went into it with the mindset where it's like, I'm just going to record everything. I'll comment on things when they happen naturally. And like, maybe that will edit together into something, fun or whatever. But I think I got like one episode into that and I'm like, yeah, this ain't it, chief. Like, not great. So it was around that time then, after a little bit of pause, where I believe, if I remember it right, you reached out to me and you're like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Like, if you want to, play some games and write some coverage. And I was like, yeah, sure. It's like, I don't have to run everything. I can just do my thing and share my thoughts. And that seems like a golden opportunity. So, and I was like, we already had a rapport together by that point. And it's just like, yeah, I'm definitely down to throw my hat in the ring. So that's kind of where my entry point was. It's very similar, like you said, like a couple of false starts, trying some stuff on my own. But I think, as in life, as I've gone on, I've really solidified that I thrive more, I think, in a support and team-based role than I do in a leadership role. That's not to say that I haven't had to step up and take leadership roles on different things, but like, I think ultimately I get better work done in a support kind of position. And so going into it, I was just like, yeah, like this sounds like it'll be up my alley.
Yeah. And so there we go. Okay. We've set the stage there. And I think for me, a big part of this was, obviously nowadays you don't need much web development experience. I mean, a lot of stuff is like click and drag. I mean, the hardest part that you'll find is paying for like like paying for the networking, of getting the servers up for your website, and maintaining all that, and server links and all that stuff. The back end will be a lot more complex than actually setting up a website. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. If I'm being honest, we didn't start that way. We started with Blogspot, which was a free blogging website that it was supported by Google. And so that was the first probably year of Respawn Station was on that. And that's when we built up our kind of audience of, regular people and, our regular visitors. And um, we also, in that first year, it was a really important year because we were all just text. We had no video content until 2024. So, and we started like mainly we really started in 2021. And so those first few years were just writing, but we were able to in the first year set up some good relationships and get press authorized for several different like, PR places, and that gave us some good space in the business. I'm not saying we're well known in the industry, right? But I can certainly like at this point I can reach out to any number of PR teams that we've worked with in the past, and I at least can get a message off and be like, hey, what's this and how's this working, and can we get a code for that or whatever. And in general, maintaining those kind of good relationships is key to anything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking about kind of bringing Nick on board, so like I said, Alexa was involved a little bit, and Austin was involved a little bit. We even had Graham as well, but the thing is, and I kind of agree with Nick. I am a little bit different in terms of like I do well in leadership roles. I mean, I also find it interesting because I think Nick, like you said, like when we went to film school, like Nick really loved, like he's really good at editing. In fact, I lost that on a bidding war to get Nick as the editor for my final film. And then you know what? I just didn't. I got him anyway in the end. I just had to sit on the project for like a year. But so, and I kind of specialize in writing and directing. So I think that's an interesting kind of way that plays off. But I do agree, though, while I do prefer to be in like, okay, I can see everything and I can kind of say, all right, here's what happens. It is hard to impose that on someone else,
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't be like, hey, you got to do this, even though you don't have any interest. And so that was a big thing to for the first little bit to kind of manage and juggle. But having Nick on what made it so much more real, because it was like, okay, now I have a partner in crime. Now I know I can bounce an idea off of him and get feedback, and I know that he's like just as into it, in terms of like what we're going for, and it's also a little bit of like experience in the industry, right? So I always say this, but if you're trying to do something in any field, knowing what I don't want to say the competition, but what others are doing in that field is important. And so if you're going to someone, again, Alexa, I love her. I mean, I married her, right? But she's not involved in video games. She's currently getting into video games, and she's like getting more experience. And I can actually see her pick up on things more, easily now. But it's different. And so for her, it would be like I have to give her homework to be like, all right, now you have to watch 10 kind of funny videos, and then 2 min-max videos, and then write an essay. Like
Mm-hmm.
it would be too much. But whereas like for me, I watch just content that is the content that I go to, and I know that that's what also like Nick does as well. Different platforms, obviously, different content creators, but we're getting a kind of similar information from similar kind of avenues, and that sets you up because what the expectation is, what the idea is, and in what ways you want to subvert or meet that expectation to any degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then so with Nick on board, we really went full swing into writing articles, and we had, I mean, those like 2022 and 2023 were kind of huge in terms of just the number of articles we were putting out. I mean, here's the thing, right? I'd put out like 5 articles. Nick would put out one that equaled my 5 in length, and so it was this, it was a nice setup of like, if you ever got bored, there was always something a little bit different. And I think we really did, to our credit, we established our unique voices. Like you can read a Nick review and know, oh yeah, this is a Nick review. You can read one of my reviews and know oh yeah, that's Sri wrote that for sure. There's 5 typing mistakes in the first paragraph. Sri 100% wrote this. And he did not send it to Nick afterwards for for revision. So that's a no. And so we were able to get into a nice cadence, and that sort of brings us to the other end, right? And I think this is sort of an end that maybe Nick isn't fully involved in, but he has an idea of it. But it's the part where I was talking about where you have to talk with the PR teams and understand those those communications as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a big thing to understand is making sure you're not just stealing games, right? Don't just take a code with the intention of not covering it or not playing it. I think there's certainly a leeway. There's certainly this a grace period of like, okay, you wanted to play you had interest in this game, you played it, and then it just turns out it was not at all what you're looking for. There is some some wiggle room of like, okay, you didn't cover the game because if you would just be miserable about it. Sure.
Right.
But by and large, I think if you get a game, you should give coverage to that game as a service. And I think it's important because video games are extremely hard to make. And it's sort of like, regardless of how big the cogs you think they are, every part of this industry is a cog in this machine, right? And if you, I don't have a design illustrator, but imagine that this is the what you can see. The frame here is the video game industry machine, and you have a big cog that is game development, probably the biggest cog, and then you have publishing, another big cog. And they're both, working in sync as they go around. But then there's a smaller one that's the PR agency. And then there's another one, again, we can go granular and be like, oh, there's actually video game testing is on there as well. But there's also games media journalism is in there. And all of them have to be working in sync, well-oiled, in order for, the system to work. Mm-hmm. If the system was fully just people that stole keys and then resold them online, or typed out AI reviews or whatever, it would all fucking fall apart. The cogs would not be moving well. Mm-hmm. So it is very important to cover games, when you get them. Now, Nick, I will throw it back to you in terms of what do you think the reviewing process, because again, that's what we mostly do is reviews for video games. I'll quickly say, so like we had we were very much so into also writing reviews, or not reviews, news for articles as well. Mm-hmm. Again, when that 2022 2023 period, we were pumping these things out, but we quickly realized in 2024, when things shifted with the use of AI in Google, that it was kind of impractical for us to cover the news because, by and large, those people that we said we weren't competing with will get all of the bandwidth anyway. And even they're not going to get the bandwidth because AI is kind of like undercutting them and saying like, actually, this is what you need to know. Mm-hmm. So we've moved away in the last few months, last year or so, we've moved away from news coverage and kind of really focused on reviews and interviews and kind of guides wherever we can make them. That's kind of our focus. So I'll talk a little bit more about the other stuff, but reviews, Nick, what do you think is the process for, if you're getting into games media journalism of like, okay, how do you tackle a review, whether it be a 60-hour RPG or a 10-hour little first-person shooter?
Yeah. I think, obviously, if you're thinking about getting into it, you're interested in the space already, right? Like, I think it's probably pretty hard to say, like, oh, you want to start reviewing games, but, like, you don't have much experience playing a lot of games. And I don't mean to say that like you need to be an expert in every genre or anything, right? Because there's definitely genres of games that like I don't play, right? Like if you ask me to review FIFA 25 or whatever, it's like I have no idea how I'm gonna be able to tackle that. Like I just don't have that like yearly sports game kind of mindset or background. But I think you need to have played enough to be able to start judging your own tastes, and also being able to separate those tastes from perceived objective quality, right? So like there could be something like, I'll give the example of Sea Frog that I reviewed a couple weeks ago. That was a game that I personally like had some issues with, and it definitely hampered my enjoyment of the game. But at the same time, there's also several areas of that game where it's obviously high quality from like the visuals and the sound design and everything. And then also, even in my specific, maybe discontent with like the level of challenge or something like that, I, as a reviewer, can pierce through that and be like, if you are the type of person that likes a game like a Meat Boy or something like that, definitely give it a look. Like it's a game that like will appeal to the people that are looking for that kind of challenge, right? And so I think that is specifically a very key part of wanting to become a reviewer, is being able to detach your personal opinions on something from the equation, right? Because I feel like the biggest thing that we wanted to avoid, I feel, and like you see this online everywhere, is just the armchair review, right? Where it's just like, oh, this game, sub 30 frames, garbage. Like, it's not going to appeal to anybody. I don't even know why they spent $10 million on it. Like, that's the kind of thing you want to avoid, because that is like bottom feeder level, not to be like too like out there striking at people, but it's just like, that's just like such an unintelligent way to handle a conversation on something as silly as a video game, right? But I think that's definitely part of it. I think also that reviews, on the topic of like reviews versus like our news coverage kind of thing, at least for me personally, I don't know how you feel about it, doing the news stuff, I slipped into a mental position where I was like, okay, I'm not really adding anything to this. I'm just kind of parroting what all the other websites are parroting, which are what they're parroting from the press releases from the companies and stuff. Yeah. And so it's like, to a degree, that is part of like our podcast formula, right? Is talking about headlines and stuff. But at least in the form of a conversation on video, it gets at what you were mentioning, where we kind of found our voice with the reviews. Like we can kind of ingest that at the same time as we're talking about headlines, versus it just being a detached text where it's just like, well, yeah, like we could have literally just copy pasted this from a press release and this is our news article, right? So for me personally, it while there is importance in that news, I don't think that like it was creatively satisfying as much as putting your stamp on a review and being like, this is what I think about this game, and I think I did a pretty good job at conveying why a person may or may not be interested in a game. And not to take up too much more time, but
take as much time as you want.
Specifically at your point about like between a 60-hour game and a 10-hour game, that I think just kind of comes with, kind of what I mentioned, playing a bunch of different types of games. Games are a very unique medium to review in that, most film buffs at the highest end of like a time commitment to a movie would be like 4 hours, I feel like. It's not really much that you get much past
and
that.
They're just binging Zack Snyder movies.
And on sort of a similar scope there, right, you have like, TV reviewing where you might get like a season of a show, and a season might be like, brushing up against 10, 12, 15 hours or so. Games are a unique beast in that like a big game can run 100 hours, right? And that's not like an outlandish number. It's definitely something that you have to be committed to. There's like a patience involved in like being able to pay attention to like a plot and like, understanding how game mechanics evolve over extended periods of time. And then on the flip side of that, being able to change the expectation of, a 100-hour game to a game like a Call of Duty that'll take like 5 hours. It's like, okay, Elden Ring was 100 hours and they're charging the same amount of money that you are. Like, how does that make sense? Well, you have to look at a bunch of different factors in regards to that. So it's not easy, I'd say, but both you and I have kind of what you mentioned, that experience of doing it for so long, that it's just like, okay, we kind of have our own ingrained expectations when it comes to tackling a big game versus a bunch of smaller games.
Yeah. Now, kind of getting a little bit more in the weeds, specifically about reviews. There's a few things I want to mention. 100% agree with the fact that don't. So here's the thing: you need to find your voice when it comes to reviews, and just because you play video games doesn't mean that you are good at reviews for video games. You can
Right.
review video games, right? At the same time, I think you can learn. It'll be easier if you're kind of analyzing stuff as is already, but you can learn over kind of iterations of just kind of playing things and taking notes. I literally take physical notes, but it varies. For the most part, I take physical notes. I just have a book where I just kind of write down what I think about any given game. And that's evolved in the process, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of explaining my process, but everyone will have their own version of how note taking and stuff like that will be easy for them. But if your goal is to write reviews, and kind of like what Nick was saying, that should be the goal, because that's the one where your voice will be heard and your tone and your kind of just general interest will be heard. Your video game news coverage won't be that drastic, like unless you have great connections, which again, if you're starting off, you're listening to this, you're not you don't have Kojima on speed dial. You can't just be like, hey Kojima, can you give me some scoops
Mm-hmm.
on Death Standing 3 on the Reach. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not creative. So regarding the reviews, focus more on coverage for reviews, and the best way to do it is keep doing it. If you're starting it individually, like solo or with like one other friend, like here, the best thing to do is just build a backlog. Now, you can go to respawnstation.com and go back. We've actually didn't kind of, I think, what I was started to say, and then I might, the train got derailed. But after a year and a half of being our old host site, we actually switched to WordPress, and that's kind of all our stuff works now. It's a lot more safe and secure, at least kind of from the back end of how everything works. It's definitely more expensive, in terms of like we barely get the chance. Like we're not paying for this entirely from website funds. I'll just say that, because it's this stuff isn't, you're not in this business for the money.
Mm-hmm.
um, but though obviously you'll get video games that you can review without charge, but that's not you are putting the time in to play, review each game. Hopefully each game, at the very least, most of the games you're getting. So I'll say, if you're starting off and you're doing it from scratch, create your own website or your own YouTube channel, and you want to review games, start with your backlog of games. So when we switched to our WordPress, we brought over a lot, but not all of the articles, because there's some that we weren't quite up to the standard that we had built up to at the start. We were really all over the place, even for how I review stuff. You can definitely feel strands of how I got to where I am in terms of how I write reviews. Same thing with Nick. But it's not quite the same. And so some of them we didn't bring over, but you can go to the reviews and you can see, the first few reviews we did was Modern Warfare Remastered. I just owned it. I played it. Tales from the Borderlands. I just owned it. I played it. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Nick just owned it and played it. Resident Evil Revelations, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, Like those are all games that we reviewed because we wanted to, we wanted to play those games, and we just that was a great, if you have games in your backlog, that's a perfect way I think to start a review because you'll have enthusiasm for playing that game anyway, and then you can go in and kind of put your thoughts down.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think you'll be surprised at how much you find out about yourself as you're playing some of these games. By the way, I know that sounds a little weird, but it's true. But then after that, after we got those initial reviews out and people, we're able to show PR people, hey, this website is real. We are reviewing stuff. It is, we're doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Then they started giving us games, and we got Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning and some very Kingdom of Amalur: Redout, Space Assault, Cyanide and Happiness. Those are very interesting games that the first ones. But also it keeps going, by the way, like Titanfall 2, Modern Warfare 2, those are all games that we just reviewed because we wanted to cover them.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to play them and we covered them. So that's another thing, build a backlog of reviews first, and then send out stuff to PR to kind of get verification. I wouldn't ask for games right away. Personally, I think that you need to build that trust up a little bit. So I would say, I get added to distribution lists. That's a huge thing. If you can say, hey, I do this work, this is what I do, introduce yourself, and then say, can I please get on your distribution list? That way, as they're putting out news release and press releases, how often they do it, you'll get them. And then whenever a game comes along that is interesting to you, you can ask for a code and there'll be a little bit of an experience there. Also, by and large, you're not going to get AAA games right off the bat for free. All right. And I want to establish that because, again, it's sort of similar to the thing of like, oh, I want to play video games. I want to do walkthroughs and stuff because, like, I want to get paid for it. You're not going to get paid for that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, I've been doing this for a while now, and I, as of this morning, just applied for YouTube Partner Program, because so for me, it's always just playing video games with friends is the idea, and so the monetization of it, which isn't that money, which isn't that much money, is kind of secondary. So I would put that aside. If you're here, if you want to be a games journalist, because you want, Elder Scrolls 6 for free. You want GTA 6 for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen. What's so great, I think, about having done this for a few years now is I've been introduced to some games that I would have never played or even would have been on my radar. Nick, I don't know if you can personally speak to this. I know you've played some kind of gems here and there. But yeah, I mean, there's a game that I kind of refer to all the time. It's called Spellforce 3. It's this it's this like tactical RPG, the likes of which I would have never had any interest in. But man, I was so into that game. I was so into that lore, the build of that game. I ended up giving it a 8 out of 10, and I would have never even kind of give it a second glance if I would never actually I would not have come across it if not for the fact that we were in this business kind of getting press releases. And then it became my duty because I was like, I realized what this was. I realized how much I liked it, that I had to make sure I was covering this game and, sending out a strong voice saying, hey, this game is pretty freaking cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can, other people can kind of get exposure to it.
Yeah.
Anything for you, Nick?
The biggest thing that a site like us can provide is actually something that Jeff Keighley mentioned at this top of Summer Game Fest, which is one of the biggest issues in the industry facing a lot of, game developers is discoverability. Like that's the biggest thing that, exactly like you said, there's been games. The one that jumped to mind when you were talking there was Spin Rhythm XD that we both played the other year.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
That game was the definition of it came out of nowhere. You were like, hey, check this game out that we got a code for. And I played it and devoured it in like 2 days and had like a fantastic time with it. And it's like, yeah, like I like rhythm games. I've played Guitar Hero, like, all this other stuff, but it's like would I be scrolling through a store and just on like a little info or like a little thumbnail graphic see Spin Rhythm XD and be like, yeah, that's a game that I want to give a shot? Like, I don't know. But because, both you and I had, such a great time with it purely through this avenue of, running the site and everything, it was just like, yeah, we definitely need to talk about this and be like, hey, if you're not paying attention to Spin Rhythm, give it a look. I've played a lot of rhythm games, and that's the best rhythm game I've ever played on a controller, like ever. Like, so yeah. I think discoverability is huge in this aspect, and it's a huge thing that we are able to provide, even if it's to a handful of people. I mean, a handful of people is more than zero. So and then a handful can snowball into more people, and then you get a Balatro where it's up for game of the year. Like,
yeah. I also think, as maybe as deeply profound as it might sound, like, ask yourself why you're doing it. Like I said, don't do it for the money, because I guarantee you, all right,
because there is none.
it is not. Look, I will, just to give you guys an example, all right, I will pull it up. All right, we yesterday on Respawn Station made 11 cents. All right, you think you can retire off that money? Go ahead. But and sure, if you're pumping out just fucking content, you're just everything's an article. Sure, that number would go up. We're definitely become a lot more curated in terms of like what we're putting out is either like a review that we really care about, or like an interview with like I was just mentioning earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But ask yourself why you're doing it, and I think a big reason why you should do it is if you actually care about video games. Not just like, oh, I love this one game. Sure, you can like one game, but this really is about like the business of video games, the experience of enjoying video games. And one of my favorite things about doing what we do, hands down, all right, and it is, look, there's a few good things, all right. I'll say this because I feel like I've been a little bit like, stay away, don't go. There are some great things. Obviously, I said you get free games that may not even been on your radar, and you might find the next game that you just fall in love with. That's absolutely one of them. Another thing is getting to play games early. That I don't think that feeling will ever grow old, Nick. But like, it's the idea of like, sometimes we'll get a code and it's like a week or two before it comes out. And as someone who's very much so a PlayStation like trophy hunter, I'll play through the games, and then I got to admit, I'll go on PSN profiles and I'll be like, oh, who's in the top 10 there? Who's the first top 10 for people to get that? Oh, I'm in there. Okay. That's a cool part too, but just playing games early and it feels like it makes you feel like you're in some exclusive club, like, oh yeah, only a few people are playing whatever I'm playing right now. And then the other thing though, the coolest thing, hands down, is interacting with developers. There's been quite a few times. I mean, we've mentioned now interviews. We've gotten a lot more interviews recently because we're a lot more kind of like outgoing about it. It's definitely not 100% hit, but like, for now, like we get probably like 3 or 4 reviews of every 5 that we send out. So like we'll ask for 5 and we'll probably get 3 or 4 yeses to those interviews. And those are the ones you guys are seeing on the site.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we're kind of, we've built up this, I don't want to say this brand, we've got to pat ourselves on the back of there for that. But we have the website, we do the podcast, and, we have a certain kind of audience that we bring in. And, we get like, still we get hundreds of readers every week that come into the website to check out one thing or another, which is awesome. But we can use that to say, hey, do you want to talk to us and maybe we can get you some kind of eyes on your product. But interacting with developers on just kind of like seeing them, I don't know, something about like writing a review and having them like, mention it, or like knowing that they read it or message us or retweet it or something like that. That never gets old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, highlight for
Or
me
just like
was
them.
John Johannes liking my review for
Yeah.
Hi-Fi Rush. That was yeah, I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
That
And
yeah,
there's been
you're
some
right. That
real.
is like the
You go
ultimate
ahead.
thing in like validation, where it's just like, okay, like that specifically. And also, I remember when we first started, kind of like, finding our stride with the reviews. Uh, Groups like you mentioned, like MinMax and Kind of Funny. Like I was following Easy Allies and Inside Gaming and all that outlets that did reviews in addition to a bunch of other stuff. And I remember one of the first big ones that you gave me a code for was Biomutant. And I remember
Yeah.
Easy
Yeah.
Allies review coming out for Biomutant, and they gave it the same score that I did. Minus, I hadn't watched
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
until specifically until I had finished the review and everything. And I was like, that is such a validating feeling. It's like these people that I look up to that I've watched for years, and it's like, okay, my again, it's like you don't want to
The sensor's calibrated.
exactly, you don't want to confuse that with like parroting or like following people, but it's just like at a
Right.
certain point it's just like, okay, my tastes are refined enough. I guess essentially what I'm trying to say is like that was when the feeling of like imposter syndrome kind of went away, because it was just like, okay, my taste and my voice, I think, is developed enough to where like these people that I respect and follow for their tastes on games, I'm similarly in tune, like you said. So yeah, that was another thing
Yeah.
for sure.
You bring up a good point. I think imposter syndrome is definitely like a big thing for a while, for me at least, in terms of like I know that like there's no shortage. How do I say this? It is a lot of work to do everything that we do here, right? And we should mention like we're doing this with day jobs. Like we have other things that we do, and then we're like, all right, let's sit down and work on this, like write this review, edit this podcast, whatever it be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot of work, and so it's there's certain things I will say that will give you the satisfaction, but it's hard to feel like, oh, I am a games journalist to whatever degree, or like identifying yourself as one. But I think there's a certain point where you have to, the same thing goes for like if you're trying to be a filmmaker, of like, oh, don't say you're an aspiring filmmaker. Say you are a filmmaker. And I think at a certain point, I don't know if I can, I don't know if there's one single point that made it for me, of like, oh, I deserve to call myself a games journalist,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But there's several highlights. One of them, an all-time highlight for me, is a game that I so at the time I just I was recovering from my torn ACL surgery, and I was playing a game called My Time at Sandrock, and I loved it. I was really just, it was exactly what the game that I wanted at that moment. And a bucket list item for Respawn Station for a long time was to be included on one of those like scoring cards, where like it's like the full art for the game, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
just full of scores. And Respawn Station was up there. Um, and again, I'm looking at it now, but like it is, you can see it. It's almost dead center of the image, but to be included on this list is surreal, because like I see again, I see God is a Geek, the gamer, VG 24/7, Noisy Pixel. There's one that was like completely uh crazy, but I can't scan all these games enough. Screen Rant is on here, but yeah, like being on this and Sports Illustrated. Yeah, we're two below. We're on the list with Sports Illustrated. So yeah, that was a huge moment as well. Like
And
a very like, oh my God, we fucking did it.
and we should like clarify, like we're not trying to just like pat ourselves on the back and everything, but at the same
No, yeah,
time,
yeah,
it's like when you do start this journey and you do reach a point where you get to feel a moment like that, like it's something to be immensely proud of. And like it's like, again, it's
yeah.
like we're two underneath Sports Illustrated on the My Time at Sandrock review score. Like it's it's both little and big at the same time, and it's progress is progress, and it's something to be proud of.
Yeah, and you'll go a long way. The first however long, unless you get lucky and you find the right tone and you strike it just right, and then your first thing pops off, and all of a sudden everyone's got eyes on you, which could definitely happen. Very unlikely. For most people, it doesn't happen, practically thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the first little bit, you'll just be doing it for the love of the game, baby. That's entirely all that's motivating you, is because you're like, I love video games, and this is what I want to do with my spare time. And to bring an end to this conversation, I think we've kind of tackled it. I mean, well, Nick, I'll throw it back to you before I kind of close it out, in case there's other things we want to touch on. But yeah, so to kind of reiterate, right? Like, find out, sit yourself down, realize why you want to do what you want to do. And for some people, it might be trying it out. I've seen so many people that start it, and then like 2 months later, they're like, all right, well, that was fun, I guess. And then they'll bail on it. And sure, you lose $20 on registering the domain name, or however long you took to edit those videos if you're doing it on YouTube. But then you move on.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. You tried something, you didn't like it, whatever. But if you want to stick with it, to keep going, you got to sit yourself down, ask yourself why you're doing it, give it an honest effort, figure out your own tone, your own voice, and develop a backlog of content. If you want to, there's another side of this, I should say, because we've mainly talked about independent games media, but there is also like freelancing, like writing for one of the bigger platforms like IGN or Game Informer or whatever. Even if you want to do that, if you want to become a freelance writer, the best thing you can do is still build a backlog of content. And again, news coverage is good to say, hey, I'm diverse in my experience. But reviews, back them up, just backlog them, play through games that you really want to play through, analyze them, review them, get them out there. And that review will be there, and will, even if it doesn't get people clicking on it right away, there's reviews that I wrote a review for Sleeping Dogs, the definitive edition. Again, one of the first games before we were kind of getting games freely. I reviewed that game, and I was like, okay, like 5 people read it. It consistently every month still gets views or like readers coming in. Not sure entirely why. I don't know if like something's happening with Sleeping Dogs every day, but it just kind of keeps moving along. And once you've put it out there, don't worry about it too much. Let it ride. Let that article go out into the internet. It'll find its audience eventually, and build up that backlog, like I said, and then you can go out and proactively outreach to PR agencies or game developers. Game developers will give you games. But that is a trust. That is trust that you cannot break, because one, you're an asshole if you do, and two, you're ruining it for everyone else, because not only are you taking a game code and fucking not using it or selling it or whatever for when someone else who could be playing that game and reviewing it would do it, but it also muddies the water and kind of makes it harder for in the future for like that game developer. If it's an indie game developer and they've put 5 years of their life, working part-time on this game, and then they give out a code, and then it's like, oh, okay, nothing happened. It's gonna make them a little bit more tepid the next time that they're asked for a code. So keep that in mind, and yeah, reach out to developers. Developers love to talk about their games. It's just that they like, especially indie game developers, right? Like, I'm not saying, again, first of all, you can't just email Bethesda and be like, hey, what's the scoop? Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But two, don't like it doesn't matter. Bethesda will get 100 cover. Like Todd Howard can say, I'm wearing only sleeveless shirts from now on for Game Development, and 100 websites will pick that up and write an article about it. They'll be behind the scenes, picking it apart and saying, what does this tank top mean? Sleeveless gameplay. And there's this whole thing. Indie games don't get a fraction of that coverage, and so reach out to indie game developers. They are willing to talk to you about their game. A lot of them are probably too nervous to actually reach out themselves. And so doing that proactive kind of outreach and giving exposure to games and, doing it because you love the game is, that's all you're really going to get for a while. And then eventually, as you keep doing it, you'll get some more, you'll get more game codes, and you can kind of expand your own horizon. There's, like we said, there's games that we would not have played or would not have heard of if not for this. And they're and I also think, Nick, feel free to kind of give me your thoughts on this. When you're reviewing games, I think sometimes even when they're bad, they kind of leave a memory of like, oh, but I remember reviewing that game. Like,
oh, for sure.
Even if they're not great.
It's an adage that I've heard from a lot of reviewers where what you want is a good game or a bad game. What you don't want is a forgettable game. That's the biggest
100%.
thing. So yeah, even if something just really grinds your gears or whatever, like at least you have something to talk about and it's something to refine your voice on and everything. And again, even bad games serve a purpose when you're trying to build that backlog or when you're trying to hone in on your tastes. Like a bad game is a great example of things that you don't like and that you don't think are, a great way to tackle a specific kind of gameplay idea or concept. And that kind of feeds into all the future reviews that you'll go to as well, because you'll have experience and past examples to draw on when you're making different kind of comparisons or when you're thinking more critically about a specific game that you're playing.
Yeah. But I think we've exhausted at least most of the points that I think you can talk about regarding games journalism, games media, and how to get into it. Anything I'm missing, Nick, from your perspective? Anything that we should kind of any angle that we should mention?
As far as what we have experience with, I would say we nailed a pretty good amount of that. And not to put like a nail in anybody's coffin or anything here, but it's like you made the point, and I think it's worth reiterating too. While it's a very prideful thing for us and a thing that we very much enjoy and put a lot of our spare time into, like, it's the chances of you putting out your review and it getting to the front page of Reddit and there's 100 million people reading it, like it's probably not going to happen. So I feel like a lot of people, at least that I come into contact with casually, like they hop in saying like, yeah, I want to give it a try and everything, and then they don't see that immediate success. They kind of internalize that, and it's like, okay, there's something wrong with how I tackled this, and then they just go away with it. And it's like, I think if there's one thing that we can both attest to, it's that we both had failure before we landed on Respawn Station. So yeah, I not to say that what we used to do,
oddly poetic in a way, Respawn Station, we both had to, something had to die before we had to come to here.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's like, it's not like I don't have any pride in my prior work. I have a lot of pride in my prior work, but it's like, it's,
Absolutely.
It is a hard thing to keep consistent, I would say. That is the biggest thing that I always struggle with, is keeping consistency.
Yeah. And doing it solo is the hardest. The last tip of the day, if you can find a friend that can, is willing to go on that ride with you, it'll help out a lot. Not just for like coverage, but at the very least it doubles the fact, like I put out an article, Nick puts out an article, and that's that's double what we were gonna be putting out. But also it gives you someone who can give you an honest feedback of like, hey, this doesn't work, this works, this is good, this is not. And then you can develop the kind of this journey is shared, and it's a lot easier when it's shared, and then you can kind of develop it. Obviously, we until last year we hadn't done a podcast or anything, and now we're 50 something episodes in, and so yeah, it makes it a little bit easier if you got company. So, and it doesn't help if it's a good company. So, or it doesn't hurt, I should say.
Nah, it doesn't help.
It doesn't help. Worst company, the worst company, the better. That's how you keep yourself strict. But with that said, I think we've covered most of how this works. If there's any straggling thoughts or anything, we'll I'm sure something will come up, but we'll bring it in next episode. So come back next episode and see what we got to say. See, and also hooks. That's how you keep people coming back. That's another tip.
Don't put the review
part
scores
of this...
in any of your reviews. Keep them on that hook.
Yeah,
the next review gets the score for the last game.
Yeah, I was gonna say moving along. So like, come back for my next review. That's where you'll see the score for this one. And it's or better yet, have each review be an enigma, and you have to solve it in order to get the review score. That's how you do it. So then people don't fucking just. Honestly, well, I think I might have just come up with something. There you go, chat. If you figure that out, if you figure out how to do that, good for you. Good for you. It'll definitely beat the process of people just scrolling to the bottom and being like, "Oh, 6 out of 10. All right," and then clicking away, not realizing what you had to say or mean. But with that said, hopefully we give you a grounded, realistic idea of what to expect with independent games media in 2025. It's not easy, but it's not hard, and you have to do it if you like it. And if you like this, then you should subscribe, because we got new episodes every week. And check out our website where you can check out reviews for a whole bunch of games, such as, I already mentioned the old ones, but Kaya's Prophecy. Graham just put that out recently, and he's working on another one, so shout out Graham. Spray Paint Simulator, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, The Precinct, but also read an interview with Star Sand Island technical director on the NPC affection system and heart stories. Or if you're looking for a little bit of a different piece, a little bit of an opinion piece, which we've recently started to do, you can read my article called The $80 Era and How Gamers Are Paying More for Less. That's an interesting one, That's an interesting one. But with that said, people, as always, thank you so much for listening. And Nick, I've realized you got to do this, so you got to take us out. Damn it.
Have a good night, a good morning, and a damn good time.
There it is.